Okay. Welcome to class 4,
Thank you.
telling your life story. Welcome to our new people and any new people that may be joining us on video, online. Well, we have been hopefully making progress. Maybe it's a good time to do kind of a reality check for those that have been here a few weeks. How are we doing? Are we making progress? Our goal with the class is every week to write on our own for about 15 to 30 minutes a day, Monday through Friday or Saturday or Sunday, whatever, every day you can, and and come up with roughly over the course of the 8 weeks. Now 5 weeks left. This is the 4th week, whatever. About 50 or so memoirs that we can compile into a draft of your autobiography. So that's the goal of the class. How are we doing on it? That would mean that if this was class 4, we've done 3 weeks, 3 times our goal of 7 or so per week would be about 20. Does anybody have 20 of their memoirs done? How about 15? 10?
10 maybe.
10 maybe, okay. Well, there's no grading in this class. You can do it at your own pace.
Let me just ask you, do you ever hit dry spells? Because like last week, I was writing really good when I first came here.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, okay, well, nothing's hitting me today. I just don't know, I mean.
I think the more you do it, the more it flows.
Yeah.
In a way. So don't let that stop you from doing it. Sometimes you just have to pick a different prompting question to get going. And if you want, pick a different season of life. There's no hard and fast rule. My kind of guidelines were that if we picked out of the 150 or so questions, if we picked about 10 or 15 from each of the 4 sections of life, you'd have a pretty balanced, at least, skeleton of your whole life story, over the course of the 8 weeks. So maybe switching to another season of life from retirement to maybe your career, or some of the questions are on favorite places you've traveled. As you shared last week, one of your stories. Maybe you want to write some memories about your earlier childhood and your memories of mom and dad. Hopefully you have fond memories. If not, now's the time to clear that out and vent it so that you can move on if there are things that are holding you back in forgiveness, etc. So, okay, well, it can be done at any pace we want. We may even continue beyond the 8 weeks if that's what we want to do. I don't have any hard and fast rule. This is our first class that we've done here at the Friendship Center, and so we're learning as we go. I have, because I'm teaching the class, made it a kind of a high priority for me. So I've actually, just this last week, made it through all 50 of the memoirs, and I'm now working on editing it, putting in photos, and I will actually send you a draft if that gives you some inspiration. Now I've been working 4 to 8 hours a day on it, for the last month really, and so I feel like I should stay at least one step ahead of the class in doing it myself. Also, I'm proving to myself that it can be done. I've proven that it could be done in a month if you really put your mind to it and didn't. But it can also be done over a year if you've got a lot of other things on your plate and aren't that motivated that you need it or want it done. In other words, you're not on your deathbed or anything such as that. Yeah, with that said, I'd say onward and upward, and if you hit a little glitch in writing, move to a different question, a different topic, and come back to that one later, or maybe that one wasn't a good topic for you. Like I say, I've given 150 so that you can choose 40 or 50, and that should be, and then you can add your own if you want. So there's nobody saying that these questions are the only ones, but I found that I was able to find 10 or 15 from each one that struck me that I could write on. So that's the goal.
Like the lady here that was asking about, you come up to a blank, like you're still what do I write now, For me, because, well, I'm British now, but for me, I get up and walk away, go and have a cup of tea and a biscuit.
I was going to say, do you have clotted cream as well?
No, I don't have that. Maybe in my younger days.
Yeah, it's not that easy to find here in the States. All right, so again, the purpose of this class, twofold, is so that you create a record and snapshots of your own life for your own beneficial and personal growth, as well as for your posterity. So there's really a twofold purpose. A lot of people start off journaling and then they kind of they lose interest in it because whatever, it's like an old preacher said, if you don't have a so that, so what? But if you have a so that is that you're doing it for others, as well as the reflection on these things can often help you personally grow, then you do have a so that, and that'll give you a purpose to keep going. So today, class, where did I put my outline? Yeah.
4, I think.
4, yeah, I know, I have it. I have everything but that right here. Why is that? That's 1, 2, 3. Could somebody grab me a copy of it there? I'm sorry.
This?
Yeah, please. I seem to have given out my copy, so now I don't have my own. Yeah, thank you. So, the topic today is the 2 halves of life, and I subtitled it Order to Disorder to Reorder. And it seemed like in our life that I saw an article recently that said that the happiest times in life are in your early 20s and late 60s and 70s. And it was kind of interesting why in those 2 points. Well, in your early 20s, because your whole life's before you and it's a blank piece of paper which you can fill in any way you want, and you still have limitless hopes and dreams, etc., etc. Your 70s is for different reasons, because you've let go of those early dreams and you're rather content to embrace the realities of life, and so you've reached a point of contentment with your life however it is gone. And so I thought that was interesting. I'm 69 myself, and in fact I identified that 69 was the happiest year. Of course, for me, 69 was a very roller coaster year because I had a double lung transplant, and it was a year of quite a bit of turmoil in my life that caused me to be, not exactly on joyous cloud 9 type thing all year. But I think the point of it is that Carl Jung says the greatest and most important problems in life are unsolvable, that we must outgrow them. And I thought that was an interesting insight, because a lot of times we spin our wheels trying to solve all of our uncomfortable circumstances, and really they're just part of life. It's something we got to go through, and instead of trying to change the circumstance, if we back off and let the circumstance change us, then we will indeed outgrow the problems rather than having to have them changed. And I think that's part of the maturing process. And as we're reflecting on our life, things that we in our 20s, 30s, and 40s saw as unsurmountable crises, now in our 60s, 70s, 80s, may be viewed as major growing points in our life, that we hit those things and somehow we overcome them. I mean, we're still here. We made it. And so Rohr says that you might even say that we learn more by doing things wrong than by doing them right. And that really struck me, that if I think back in my life, it's when we do things wrong that we learn a lesson. And with age comes wisdom, reflecting on our past experiences can serve not only our cherished memories, but also grounds to impart this hard-won knowledge to the next generation, to our youngers. And so that's part of the reason I think of doing this, life story, autobiography, memoirs, whatever you want to call it, is to be able to impart this knowledge and wisdom so that hopefully maybe your kids don't have to, or grandkids or great-grandkids have to go through and do the same dumb things that we might have done. Likely they'll have to do different dumb things, but at least maybe they won't do the same dumb things. Carl Jung also said that what is great in the morning is of little importance in the evening. And if we think about that in terms of our life, think about what was so important to us that we just couldn't live without. That new car, that new this, that whatever in the early part of our life. And now it's no big deal. I mean, I find myself shedding things rather than accumulating more things at this stage of life, right? It's all about, letting go of things at this point. But Carl Jung also observed that our life is roughly divided in two halves. The first half of life is about building our container, building our external, our ego, et cetera, and and our identity and surviving. And that's important. It's not wrong. It's just a normal part of life. But in the second half of life, we usually come to a part where we're more concerned with what's inside the container than the way it looks on the outside. Let's face it, all of our containers are wrinkling and becoming, more and more breaking down and having issues.
Things are hurting, things are.
Yeah, right. We have aches and
falling,
pains, and so we find great joy just waking up and not having a sore back in the morning or something, or having a good night's sleep, not having to get up 10 times and go to the bathroom, whatever. So we start appreciating these little things, and as we age, again, author Richard Rohr, who there's in the bibliography several books I recommend by him, he says that we see a life pattern. That we have order in our life, then we go through some disorder, and then we reorder our life. And this is seen in life, death, and then resurrection or reincarnation, whatever you may believe, if anything. It can be seen in as not the exception, but the rule, the norm, to go through these things. So, in the words of a Lady Julian of Norwich, who was a spiritual writer, she says, first comes the fall, then the recovery. Both are the mercy of God. So when we can come to a point in our life where we see our fallings as still a part of God's plan for our life, or the universe's plan, however you want to look at it, then we're at a place where we can be at peace. We can hold paradoxes without having to have it either or, good or bad, up or down, in or out. We can see that all things can be used. And if we share this message with our youngers, we're doing them a great favor, I believe. So the great problem, I think, in American culture today is the vast majority of youngers and far too many elders are still stuck in the first half of life. Many times we don't mature into the second half of life until we're on our deathbed, until we're faced with what one author calls enlightenment at gunpoint, right? Then we finally come to the notion that I must be more than just my body, because my body's going to go here pretty quick.
Yeah.
Or I hope I'm more. And so through quiet meditation, spiritual practices, we can begin to experience this letting go of our ego, letting go of our false self, and embrace our true self far before we get onto our deathbed. Why wait to the very end? That's my attitude. So anyway, those are just a few of the little things I wanted to share with you. I wanted to share this book with you, Gideon's Dream, which I heard about, and a fellow by the name of Deepak Chopra, who's an MD and a spiritual writer, says it's an inspiring journey of transformation for both children and adults.
Oh, yes.
well done. And again, it's illustrated by one of the illustrators for Walt Disney, you probably recognize. But it's called A Tale of New Beginnings, Gideon's Dream. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's basically the story of a caterpillar who dreams of flying one day. And then he's on a tree and he ends up on a leaf and he ends up floating down and feeling the rush of wind, and the ride was fun. It was a little scary and bumpy, he said, but he said, wow, look at that view. I can see a lot from this. Anyway, he sets off to understanding, how do I go about flying? Is that something that I can learn how to do? It says, can you imagine a little caterpillar learning to fly? And he's telling all of his friends about what a wonderful euphoric feeling that they're too busy working, and then suddenly the leaves that they're on up on the tree start to fall, and they all start to have this experience. And so he dreams about it, and this feeling of flying, etc. And then he decides to one night go off on his own, and he goes into his little cocoon, and lo and behold, he is he's still hard at work in his cocoon figuring out how to fly. He just really wants to know how it's done. And then suddenly he wakes up the next morning and notices that he has wings. And so it's a transformation process that he goes through that didn't involve him thinking about it. It was just a natural part of his maturity. And then he notices all the other caterpillars are now turning into butterflies. And so, it's a wonderful little story that's for kids and adults, that that which we dream of and sometimes work really hard to do sometimes comes when we let go and just allow the process to happen.
Sometimes you have to just say, I'm at the point where I'm tired of doing this by myself, going through life by myself. And you say, God, can you help me? Or can you show me doors that are open or closed? And I try to live my life. I try to, I'm still searching for my purpose. I'm always searching for it. But I try to look what's placed me in the right place, right time, right people, all those things. Because I know that works. I've seen it work. And I'm probably getting off on a different tangent, but
this is an open mic night here or day.
Anyway,
so to share what's on your mind. But I agree that until we hit a point where we're unhappy with the way things are, we don't really change. And so this little caterpillar, he was unhappy with where he was, and he was trying to figure it out. But I think the message here is that this transformation that went on was out of his control. It was just part of his evolution, that he would eventually, his dream would come true. And that's he really went through this sort of death inside the cocoon, and then a rebirth into a butterfly. And that's, I think, what our purpose is to find what it is that, like you said, our purpose in life. And to have a purpose-driven life is to feel more fulfilled, more at peace, and to, be a better person to be around. People like to be around people who have a purpose and know what it is, and they go through life with that. Some people figure it out sooner than others. Some don't figure it out at all. And so, but if that's the desire of our heart, that's what we'll find, And so, but a lot of it is just this being willing to embrace the downsides. One of the questions that I ended up doing was, what are the low points of your life? And I came up with 8 of them, and I went into detail about one of them. And if I were to tell you that one, it would be heart-wrenching, because it involved a forced separation from a beloved daughter for like 5 years, based on a complete fabrication and lies and misunderstandings, etc. And is there anything worse for a parent than to be separated for false purposes? And then, but eventually we were reunited, and guess what? We're closer than ever before now as a result of it. Anyway, anyone want to share any of their stories that they've written, any memoirs this week? The floor is open.
Yeah.
Good.
I decided to start with childhood.
Mm-hmm. You're a
And-
chronological guy. Let me guess, you're a retired engineer.
Yes, yes,
Oh,
I
right?
am.
Just a guess. You
And
just
I
couldn't figure
appreciate
out the idea of starting with that.
Gideon's dream. I really appreciate that.
Uh-huh.
I wish I'd read that before I went through Navy flight training.
Oh, yeah.
It would have made it easier.
Oh, yeah.
It
Definitely.
really would. I'd say to get started with childhood, I went through all my baby pictures.
Uh-huh.
And that's one thing, since I'm the oldest one in the family that's left now, I have all the records.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I got all the genealogy records, and nobody else wants to do it. And so I figure, well, geez, I gotta get them up to date and pass them on to somebody who might decide, hey, that's a good idea, you know? And likewise, I've been keeping all the photographs. I got tons of photographs, which a lot of them I didn't even go through until about 2 months ago when I started thinking about this program.
Mm-hmm.
And I got lots of baby pictures all the way on up through, and I figured, well, maybe today I can talk about the first 6 or 7 years or something to get started. And I can tell you a little bit. How many people here are familiar with northern Vermont? Anybody been up to northern Vermont? Well, okay. I grew up.
Lots
in,
of
I was-
syrup up there.
Yeah, about 40 miles from Canada and
Yeah.
about in the middle of the state,
Mhm.
New Hampshire and New York. A town of where I was actually born in Hardwick, which is south of Newport, and the town that my parents lived in was Craftsbury, which is a very small town. I mean, it was probably, 200 people or something like that, you know? And my dad was one of 7 kids born on a farm in Albany, which is very close to Craftsbury. And that's why he picked there. After he was the only one to graduate from college. And he became a high school principal, and so he gravitated to Craftsbury as principal of Craftsbury Academy. And that's when I was born in when they lived there, and the closest hospital was Hardwick, so that's where I was born. But it was a very small town, and looking back on it, if I'd been aware, probably would have been bored to tears, you know, nothing going on at all in that town. And but you know, when you're a little kid like that, you're not bored, I guess. And my parents would take me to the farm, and I'd see a lot of farm animals, and I'd see the tractors and that kind of thing, so that helped. And I these pictures showed me all the kids that I played with, and I didn't remember many of them at all. But as I grew up, the most exciting thing in my life was when my dad made the decision to become the principal of Essex Junction High School, which is right next to Burlington. And that was about 5,000 people, so that was a huge place compared to Craftsbury. And I can remember being so damn excited moving there at the age of about 4. And why I got really excited about it is it turned out that Essex Junction was a railroad depot. and all the trains from Boston and New York would come through there on the way to Montreal and whatever, and constantly. And so I spent most of my time down at the depot watching all these locomotives go through, and my mother wasn't too happy because I was constantly getting cinders in my eyes, and she'd have to get them out. And then every once in a while we'd see a locomotive that would roll over on the tracks, you know, and that was great excitement. You go and watch them do that. And the constant noise of these locomotives compared to what I was crowded with in Craftsbury, it just woke me up, I think. And then even better than that, we lived about a half a mile from the Champlain Valley Exposition, which is the largest state fairground in the state. And immediately I could hear all these motorcycles and cars roaring around, and I remember my dad would take me down there and I could watch the Indianapolis type racers going around the track. Ted Horn was one of the drivers, and then they had the hell drivers driving these cars, and then they'd have the demolition cars and all that stuff. I thought that was fantastic. The more noise, the better, you know. And then the other highlight was Burlington Airport. We were in the traffic pattern for the airplanes, and of course, in Craftsbury, I never saw an airplane. And so that was great excitement for those years. And
How
Dad,
old were you at that time when you?
I was 4 going on 5, and I went at the first grade in 1941. And my dad knew that I was interested. I knew a lot of the airplanes that would be flying over, learned what they were, all military planes. And so he'd take me to the airport every once in a while when they were there, which was fantastic. And then he also took me up for my first ride when I was probably 6 in a Cessna, and that was terrific, a highlight, you know. Yeah. And so I guess that's probably one of the reasons why I got into engineering, was because I became so interested in power. The motorcycles, the cars, the airplanes. The more powerful they were, the faster they were, the better, as far as I was concerned.
Power was engines.
Yeah, engines. And I have to feel that that's why I eventually gravitated to mechanical engineering. And I was designing engines for a while, parts of engines. And I didn't get into the jet engine design. That was way before my time, but I had a strong interest in it all the way through. Not just engines like that, but big turbines for power plants. And then when I was got in the Navy, I went into the Navy ROTC, and I had these midshipman cruises, and I was on a heavy cruiser 1 year, and so I spent a lot of time down in the engine rooms, and I knew all about the turbines and the engines down there more than anything else up on deck. And then later on, and one other year, I got on a destroyer, and the same thing. I spent most of my time in the engine room on a destroyer. And then, of course, they took us to Corpus Christi to fly airplanes for a while and learn all about that. And so it was the whole time I started in engineering, and when I was a freshman in school, and of course I kept on with that, and the combination of the Navy and engineering worked out pretty well for me. But that's getting into a little further on. During when I was age 5 and 6 and 7, I spent a lot of time in school, not paying attention to the teacher too much, but I was drawing pictures of airplanes and boats and ships and all this stuff all the time. And
Building models.
building all kinds of model planes and all that stuff, you know, and of course it helped that my cousin, he was quite a bit older than I was, but he graduated from the University of Vermont in 1941, in the summer of 41, and he'd been in ROTC there, and so he went right into the Army, and got into the Army Air Force right away, and ended up flying B-24 bombers early in the war, early enough so that he finished his 25 missions in time to come back to the United States just before his squadron went to Pulaski, and lost half of the squadron was lost in Pulaski raid. But he finished and he was back in this country, and he came to visit us, and I was pretty impressed with his uniform and all his badges and stuff that he had on.
How old were you then?
Pardon? Oh, I was in the by that time I was in the fourth grade,
Okay.
third and fourth grade, I think it was, and so he was back for the first time to home during the war, but then they immediately sent him to Kansas to start testing. He became a test pilot for the B-29. He and Larry Tibbetts were together on some of those early tests on the B-29s. And then he eventually got into B-29 squadrons, and then went over and did a hell of a lot of bombing over Tokyo. And he managed to get through the war, and he was trained to be a high school teacher, but he decided, well, the Air Force was better for him, so he stayed in. But anyway, that's later on. But he's a profound effect at my early age too, and I guess that's probably enough to cover what I've got here.
Definitely.
You can let somebody else talk.
Yeah, we're kind of up against the lunchtime deadline
Yeah.
of 11:45, so I think maybe leave it there, and next week
Yep.
somebody else can share. But yeah, certainly what happens in our early formative years can often affect us in the career that we take, in our path in life, and that's great to hear how your story. And by the way, you can do this whole class on your own terms, starting at the beginning and going chronologically, or starting. I wasn't sure if I might have some people that were kind of in the early stage of losing memory, so I thought, let's start with the latest memories and work backwards. But sometimes starting with and doing it chronologically, especially if you have lots of photos. I ended up in my draft that I'm working on, which I'll send you guys a copy just to give you some encouragement of what. And also, it's quite feasible to get 20 or 30 copies printed up with color photos in it for a reasonable cost. There's simple ways to do that. So once you get, the stages are, once you get all 40 or 50 or however many you want to start with done, then just, you need to have a friend that'll help you edit it, or I'll volunteer, I'll help you if you need it. And then add the photos that you want, scan them in and put them into the story. And then, boom, you've got something that's really quite interesting, at least for your family and friends, and posterity, if not other people that might be interested in hearing your story that go beyond your family, depending on just how, I think all of our lives are interesting to somebody. It's just a matter of whether the stories are gonna rank being a bestseller or not. That's questionable, but it doesn't really matter. It's just really the going through doing it, whether it's for one person or for 100,000 doesn't really matter. It's the process of doing it, I think, is very rewarding. So I'm glad that it's pulling out. So yeah, pull out any photo books that you have. I wish I had more. I have very few, and so I'm piecing it together with what I've got. But anyway, with that, let's continue working on doing another 6, 7 memoirs over the next week, and we'll pick it back up next Monday. I will get you a copy of the information. Any questions or anything?
May I just mention what
Sure.
the young fellow over here was on about photos, and you were on about photos.
Mm-hmm.
I never knew anybody, you know, so I'm talking about 1939,
Mm-hmm.
you know. I didn't know anybody, I'd never seen anybody with a camera. Then it was a real big deal to get your photo taken.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the place we went to, it was called Forest Wampus. You made an appointment and you got, you know, all dressed up. And you know, I went with my mother and father.
Mhm.
We have an appointment, come on today. I mean, that was a great big deal.
Get your
just to
studs on, yeah.
Get a photo taken with your brothers and sisters and so forth.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, we didn't have cameras. I seem to recall I bought my camera, my first one, I was about 18 maybe ago, and it was a box camera, a Kodak. It really was. They called it a box camera. That's what it was. It was a little box.
Yeah.
I think they're made of cardboard, weren't they?
Yeah, probably. But you know, just the difference in times and ages. You know.
Oh yeah, now of course it's all about photos for kids. I mean, they don't even do Facebook anymore. It's all Instagram, photos or videos, you know.
So he must be a young'un.
Yeah, if he was able to have all these
Well, he's
photos.
telling me all about this, and no, there was no such thing. And when I went to school, I went with a gas mask strapped to my chest.
Oh wow.
Whenever you left the house, you had to have a gas mask with you. And I go to school with a gas mask.
Oh, wow,
Wow.
wow.
I was a little different.
Yeah, sure. All right, great seeing you all, and I will see you next time, same station.
All right.
Turn this on.